Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. It is the afternoon of Friday, May 10th, 2013. We have a historic breakthrough, the kind of development that ought to renew everybody's hope in the possibility of leading world civilization out of the present crisis. And it comes in the form of a bill submitted by the newly elected Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, the first bill that she has proposed in the United States Senate. And this is a bill to force the Federal Reserve, to coerce, to oblige the Federal Reserve to make available funds at the discount rate 0.75% for the purpose of refinancing and issuing federal Stafford loans. In short, it means that student loans of at least one category, and we want all categories, needless to say, but what she's said so far is that student loans of the Stafford loan category issued by the U.S. Department of Education and Sallie Mae and so forth, that these would now go down to an interest rate of 0.75%, less than 1%. Yes, you heard it, less than 1%, 0.75%. The key to freeing an entire generation from debt slavery, from the yoke of usury, as Senator Warren pointed out in her speech on the Senate floor, which you should take a look at. You can find a link to that on tarpley.net, and I urge you to go there right now. There's a documentation building up. She points out that this coming July 1st, the interest rate on federal student loans will double from 3.4% to 6.8%. That means if you're unfortunate enough to have $100,000 of student debt, the usury bill, not even retiring the principal, but just maintaining the loan with debt service and usury, will double from $3,400 a year to $6,800 a year. Well, with the proposal made by Elizabeth Warren, it would go down from $3,400 to $750 per year. This is obviously not the universal panacea. It's not the final solution. It's not the New Jerusalem, but it is the most important positive step that we have seen in a long, long time. The best thing to come out of the U.S. Congress in years, maybe in decades, and it deserves your support. We're going to devote a significant part of this broadcast to how you mobilize. You get off your duff and mobilize to make this happen. You may not get many more chances. You may not get any more chances. If this bill dies amidst universal indifference and the catcalls of the Paul-Tard libertarians, the Wall Street shills, the reactionary ideologues, that will be a huge defeat for the American people. And let me jump ahead. The one obvious problem with the way that this has been done is that this is the kind of a measure we need in August or September or October at the beginning of the academic year. Right now it's coming towards the end of the academic year. So stay tuned for my recommendations how to make commencement 2013, the graduation ceremonies, have got to be transformed into a major occasion for organizing for this bill. Don't let that last gathering of the class of 2013, the graduating seniors, go by. Don't let reunions go by. You're going to have debt-ridden recent alumni coming back for their reunions. They should also do something to make those gatherings politically effective to support this law. Now, this is a partial nationalization of the Federal Reserve. It's exactly the method that I have been recommending. You go back to Surviving the Cataclysm, 1999, second edition, 2009. You will see this is the principal idea that we need to get the Western world out of the world economic depression, to force the central banks to act, at least in part, as national banks and to provide credit, not just for zombie banks and hedge fund hyenas, but to provide cheap federal credit in this case, cheap federal credit for production or for socially necessary activities. So the way this works is under the Warren bill, the Federal Reserve would be directed by the Congress and the president, forced, coerced, you got it, told what to do. It's the first of these in a very, very long time. I don't know how long. It goes back almost to World War II, I guess, in some ways. But they would be forced to make available funds to the U.S. Department of Education, and the U.S. Department of Education would then organize, oversee, supervise the issuance of 0.75, 0.75% loans to students and lenders. Now, the details are all in flux. So if you want this bill to go to a certain way, don't sit at home in impotence and despair, but get out there and mobilize. You've got congressmen, you've got senators. Make sure they hear about this right away. You've got to put them on notice. If you don't vote for this, you will be primaried, you will be opposed, you will lose your seat. Now, the 0.75 comes from, according to the bill, the fact that this is the discount rate. This is the Federal Reserve official discount rate. And the zombie banks, of course, are allowed to borrow from the discount window at 0.75%. And what Senator Warren says about this is it's unfair if the zombie banks can borrow at 0.75%. Why should the rising generation or any student, right? Lots of people are vocational. They're looking for degrees for vocational reasons, in other words, to advance their careers. They are young, they are middle-aged, they are old, they're all different things. Why should these students pay 6.8% interest when the zombie bank pays 1/9 of that amount? Why should the student have to pay 9 times more than the zombie bank? And here's what she says. In other words, the federal government's going to charge interest rates 9 times higher than the rates they charge the biggest banks, the same banks that destroyed millions of jobs and nearly broke the economy. This isn't right. Yes, it's immoral. It's immoral as a matter of individual ethics, but the big thing is we have now got the following situation. $1 trillion of student loans, crushing this coming generation particularly, but it's a crushing burden for many, many strata in the society. Therefore, we've got the average undergraduate degree, BA, AB, whatever it is, you're gonna come out of that with $30,000, $50,000, $60,000 of student loan debt. If it's an MA or some other kind of advanced degree, you're going to be up in the $75,000, $80,000 range easily. And then when we get to law degrees and medical degrees, you're above $100,000 easily. So why not do this obvious thing as an initial step? It's initial in many, many ways. It leads us in all the right directions. It's not a destination. It's a first step. It leads us in the right direction. It allows us to radically lower the burden of servicing this debt. It cuts the interest rates down to a manageable level. Now, I would, of course, stress, why limit this to the Stafford loans? There are other kinds of student loans. There are Perkins loans. There are the PLUS loans, PLUS. Those are generally taken out by the parents of students, right, on behalf of the students. There are private bank loans. There are other kinds of loans. All of them should be eligible to borrow and indeed to refinance at the new 0.75 level. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., urging you to do everything possible now to mobilize without stint. The sky's the limit on this mobilization. Get the Warren bill passed. Get it enacted into law by July 1st, before this doubling of the interest rates. if you're a student, if you have student loan debt, or if you're a recent alumnus, a recent graduate, if you're the parent, you have all kinds of people in the society who have direct personal stake in this. If you're interested in breaking the power of finance capital, if you're interested in subjecting the Federal Reserve to the rule of law and the will of the American people, not just cliques of zombie bankers and hedge fund hyenas, this is the measure. If you don't grab onto this with both hands and your teeth, there's very little that can be done for you. If you let this go by and it goes down to defeat, you will have nobody but yourself to blame for the immense historical tragedy that will otherwise ensue. This is a way out of the crisis. It's a first step, a first timid step, sure, but a critical, crucial first step in the right direction. So Senator Warren, again, take a look at that speech she gave. Her first bill, so far she has no co-sponsors. Let's do something about that. Get your senator, get your congressman on the phone. They have got to support this. They have got to come on board as sponsors. We're not talking about lip service. We're not talking about throwaway lines. We are talking about active support where they become co-sponsors and they organize additional co-sponsors. They organize public events. Take this into the town meetings. If they're not willing to do this, they're representing some other interest. Who could be against this? Who in his right mind could say, oh, I demand to pay 6.8% rather than about a tenth of that or a ninth of that because of some abstruse crackpot economic theory? We'll talk about that in a minute. Warren says our students are just as important to the economic recovery as our banks, right? We know the zombie banks have been getting sweetheart deals, practically 0% or thereabouts. Let's face it, says Senator Warren, banks get a great deal when they borrow from the Fed. In effect, the American taxpayer is investing in those banks. Now, let us, for our purposes, try to make clear the distinction between Treasury money, on-budget federal budget money, taxpayer money. That's one thing. The Federal Reserve is a completely different kettle of fish. Let's not mix these. Let's point out that this bill costs the taxpayer nothing. Now, some of the things Senator Warren has said about this seem to go in a different direction, that the federal government makes money on student loans. Well, I want to see the bookkeeping. I want to see the accounting behind that. What I can tell you is the federal government should not make money at the expense of crushing the younger generation with debt slavery and usury. That should not be a feature of the U.S. government. But I would argue that the big distinction here is that you're saying that the money to finance these loans, to make the loans, is not coming from the taxpayer. This is the main point. It's not coming from the pockets of taxpayers. It's coming from the cornucopia of money, which is the Federal Reserve, the unlimited credit-creating power of the Federal Reserve when it's acting as a national bank. If that money goes into productive, or in this case, socially necessary activity, this is the key, it is the principle to finance a recovery. Remember, the federal budget, whatever the neo-Trotskyists may think, the federal budget, and this is what the Keynesians and the Krugmans all say, the federal budget cannot bear the burden of financing the entire credit needs of the economy. Therefore, we looked at the zombie banks. They're essentially wards of the state. They can't finance anything. They try to finance themselves to keep their wretched existence alive. It is the Federal Reserve that has the deep pockets, right? And again, during the crisis, the Federal Reserve offered credit lines of $27 trillion to zombie banks, including foreign zombie banks. So we're saying we want a piece of that action. We want a piece of that action for the American people. We want students in particular to benefit from cheap federal credit for productive and socially necessary activities. So don't couch it that the federal government is losing money on this. No, what it will do, if you take this principle and even extend it to other areas, we'll talk about that, it is a way to relieve pressure on the federal budget, the U.S. Treasury, shifting the burden to the deep pockets of the Federal Reserve. And again, the Federal Reserve, as all central banks can make money, manufacture money out of nothing. And that is not a scandal. That will be a godsend if we switch that out of the QE3, out of the hot money recovery that Helicopter Ben has been pushing at the Federal Reserve, switch that into what amounts to a credit stimulus, because that's what we have here. This is a new window of the Fed, you may say. It's a kind of a subset of the discount window, but it's a special branch of the discount window that will open its doors at the U.S. Department of Education, and the people borrowing for student loans will be able to tap into that. It will not come from the federal budget. It will not be taxpayer money. Let's keep this distinction as clear as we possibly can. Nobody in Congress that I can remember, I think in the memory of the people now alive, can remember somebody in Congress saying, I propose to force the Federal Reserve to do this, not in the realm of their monetary policy or their even their credit stimulus policy. This is a new kind of credit stimulus specifically designed to get us out of this crisis of the student loan debacle. And now, the reason this has to be done, right, as an issue for the entire society, you have an entire generation of students in particular now whose lives have been brought to a halt. Their lives have been put on hold. You're going to come out of your undergraduate degree with $30,000 to $60,000 of high-interest student loan debt. This means your life is paralyzed. You cannot get a further advanced degree. You cannot rent a home in many cases. You certainly can't buy one. You're going to end up with your parents. You can't get married. You can't have children. You can't go out and buy washing machines, refrigerators, cars, and the other things that would provide a certain amount of economic stimulus, right? Counter-cyclical activity here in the Depression. So this has to be solved. We have reached the point where the rules of finance capital are in total conflict with the needs of human life. Human life must take precedence. The needs of generations and parents and families absolutely trump the rules of the neoliberals, the monetarists, the Austrian school, or the Keynesians. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., calling for an unconditional all-points mobilization in favor of the Warren bill. Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts senator, has submitted a bill to force the Federal Reserve to finance student loans at 0.75%. It is the first time that somebody in Congress reaches outside of the realm of the federal budget over to that central bank with an attempt to mobilize, to direct the inherent credit-creating power of the Fed in the direction required by civilization. Now, you're going to see what libertarianism really means. You're going to see what the Austrian school represents. Let's call up Rand Paul and Rubio and Cruz and Lee and all of our heroes and say, are you going to support that bill? You guys talk a game against the Federal Reserve. Here's a concrete attack on the Federal Reserve. Of course, it's not presented as an attack, but it is a way of diminishing the authority of the Federal Reserve, returning a piece of that authority back to the Congress and the president and the people, doing something of social utility, not just something zombie bankers and hedge fund hyenas want. And you're going to hear from Little Rand, from Lee, from Cruz, from the rest of these characters, Rubio. They're going to say, oh, no, that violates the free market. That violates the Austrian school. That violates Milton Friedman. Well, baloney. And they are going to lose this one. That's a losing argument by them. Any rational gathering of students, parents, and interested citizens will say the Warren bill has got to become law now. We don't care about the Austrian school, right? I looked in the Constitution. I can't find anything about Austrian school, free markets, or any of this other tripe. Now, the cat is out of the bag, of course. It's been in the Los Angeles Times. It's been in The Nation. It's been on the Huffington Post. It's been on the Daily Kos, the Boston Globe, U.S. News. It's all over the place. As far as I can see, New York Times, no, and Washington Post, I also think, no. But we've also got the crackpots coming back. Here, William A. Jacobson, clinical professor of law. I guess he's clinical. He's a professor of law who's clinical at Cornell Law School. He says, Elizabeth Warren wants to grow the bubble more by making it easier for students to borrow more money by dropping the interest rate in what amounts to a giant class warfare non sequitur. Can anybody figure that out? I don't know. Who else do we have? In the Daily Beast, Meghan McArdle, Elizabeth Warren wants to get the Fed into the student loan business. Passing the bill is not the point. It's a populist value statement. We like students, we don't like banks. Baloney. This is a concrete measure to save the average student loan borrower, $5,000 per year, $5,000 to $6,000 per year in certain cases, right, depending on the amount of debt you want. Danielle Kurzleben of U.S. News. Anyway, you get the idea. I must say, let me just give you some gems from my Twitter account. This proposal was made on the Senate floor by Elizabeth Warren on Wednesday morning, this past Wednesday. That means the 7th of May, a good day. So here's what some people say to me on Twitter. One guy says, universities should be abolished altogether. People would get jobs based on merit, not paper degrees. This is the reactionary campaign of people who say, we want college to be for elites, not for the people. Lots of luck competing with China on that basis, right? If you don't have a highly qualified labor force, you are anthropological material, okay? You're ethnographic material. The Chinese ethnographs and anthropologists will study you as the example of a failed civilization, and they'll say, what is this Austrian school that destroyed the United States? Let's see what else we have. Another person writes, the bill plays into the hands of Wall Street. We're not nearsighted anymore. We look at things long term. We've woken up. You're not nearsighted. You're blind. Let's see. I write, if your senators and reps won't co-sponsor Elizabeth Warren's bill for 0.75% student loans paid for by the Federal Reserve, then primary them, vote them out of office. How can they say no? Oh, no. And let's see what else we have. There are a couple of other gems here. Anyway, one of these people writes saying, "Oh, what they'll do is the colleges will just raise their tuition rates." Look, friends. Sometimes this is the despair of attempting political education. You can look at the price of a daily newspaper, look at the price of a stamp. You'll see that in certain key areas, the amount of inflation in the general economy, the weakness of the dollar, to be sure, it comes from deindustrialization, among other things. But the idea that you can simply raise the tuition without a limit, I think, is completely wrong. Anyway, you've got this problem right here, right now. You've got a whole generation of kids groaning under $1 trillion. Are you going to cut their interest rate, yes or no? Come on, Austrians. Come on up to the plate. And if it's no, tell us why not. And this may, if If the Austrians decide to try to fight on this one, if we could just get a movement going, we could wipe out Austrianism in the United States, right? One Austrian was enough, and that was Hitler, in case it's not clear. And we don't need Austrianism, right? We got along very well for a couple of hundred years in this country without the Austrian school, von Mises and von Hayek, and it was David Rockefeller who brought them over to spread their garbage, and of course that wonderful Russian fascist Ayn Rand. Now, what should happen now? Okay, as I say, the one problem we have is that the campuses will be shutting down now in a matter of weeks. So here's what we got to do about it. Graduation is coming up, and we have a new song, right? The old Gaudiamus igitur juvenestum sumus, Gaudiamus igitur debita delenda. We're going to wipe out our debts. Debita delenda. That's the new Latin salutatory for the coming ceremony. So usually a graduation ceremony is boring platitudes from these cynical, overpaid celebrities, and you're paying them. Forget them. Let's use the graduation ceremonies, May, June 2013, for the purpose of helping the class of 2013 go into the world not crushed, at least quite so much, by debt. And we want to get the Warren bill passed into law by July 1st. Mobilize. So here's what you want to do. Find out who the commencement speaker on your campus is. You've got to contact that commencement speaker and say, look, we are the students. We're all very interested in hitch your wagon to a star and all the other platitudes you're undoubtedly trotting out of your word processor. We want you to build your speech around the need for the Warren bill. We want a stirring, passionate call to make Senator Warren's bill into law before July 1st. So if you have a speaker who won't do that, fire them, get rid of them, tell them they're not welcome. Find a speaker who's willing to do that. You can have me. I'll be willing to do it. Webster Tarpley, Ph.D. Take a look on my website. I'll be back in a minute. World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Mobilize now for the Elizabeth Warren Bank on Students bill to lower the interest rate on federal student loans to 0.75%, saving thousands and thousands of dollars of pure usury, pure debt service for America's students, and get this done by July 1st. And that means mobilize for your graduation. Now, remember, the Wall Street lobbyists are already at work. Those Austrian school moles, those monetarist thugs are contacting everybody in the Congress. The street doesn't like this one. Yeah, the street doesn't like it, but the American people do. And that's the one thing you can bank on. The Republican leadership will be against it. The Democratic leadership will be against it. The Obama White House will be against it. On the day this came out, the Obama regime sponsored an article in the Washington Post telling them some little tricks they want to pull, some little, palliatives, amelioratives of no significance in the student loan picture. This is at least a serious measure, right? It's going to cut the interest bill. So the only hope you have to start freeing your generation and the American people in general from usury, the yoke of finance capital, and the slavery of debt is precisely this. So you got to mobilize. At your graduation, make sure that the speaker is going to come out strongly, and I mean strongly, in support of this bill. How about the president of your college or university? They know better than anybody what's at stake here. They have got to come out, and when they say, welcome, parents, we're here to support the Elizabeth Warren bill, they're not willing to do that. They don't give a damn about higher education. They're frauds. They're just agents of, whatever group of fat cats that happen to dominate on the Board of Trustees. And having mentioned the fat cats on the Board of Trustees, you got to tell them, look, guys, we want to hear you come out in favor of the Warren bill. If you're not willing to do that, we don't want you anymore. We don't want you as we're the students. We don't want you as members of the Board of Trustees, because if you won't support this, you don't give a damn about higher education. You don't care about the concrete conditions. You're out of touch. Then professors, hey, got any Keynesians? You got to tell them, look, boys, this time we're going to go off budget. We're not going to limit it to what we can get through the federal budget and so forth. This is going to be the Federal Reserve coughing up, and this expands our possibilities enormously. Now, you want to get yourself set up so that in addition to your graduation, you're going to have those debt-ridden alumni coming back for reunions. You want to make them understand this, right? They're going to be drinking to try to kill the pain of their student loans. You're going to say, look, here's a way out of this, but you got to get moving on it right now. Above all, you want to have the commencement come out with a strong resolution demanding the immediate passage of the Warren bill. You want a strong statement. It's got to be approved by acclamation or by whatever vote you want. Surely the parents groaning under their PLUS loans and the students groaning under the Stafford loans and the Perkins loans, and above all, the private loans where the interest rate is even higher, those have got to be made eligible for refinancing at this new lower rate. So the commencement goes on record with a resolution, a statement saying, we want Warren. Make sure that goes to your congressmen, your senators, right? Lots and lots of states are represented at each one of these gatherings, but make sure, if it's Harvard, make sure Elizabeth Warren hears about it, right? If it's Columbia, then Chucky Schumer and Gillibrand or whatever her name is, they've got to hear about it. And it's got to be tough. It's got to be support this, or we can see that you're an enemy. If you don't support this, you're a tool of finance capital, and we're going to do everything possible to get you out. Now, in some campuses, people may already be ready for more, right? Remember, Occupy Wall Street occupied the park for nothing, right? The purpose of the occupation was the occupation, right? We get to camp in the park. Now, once you have a demand like this, you've got a program. That's the Warren bill. All that whole repertoire of action, right? The occupation and so forth, that begins to make sense because now you've got a program, and people on the outside can say, there are the college kids. They want to cut the interest rate on student loans. That is something that's going to help 1/4, 1/3 of the American people right now, and it's going to give us the possibility to compete in the world of the 20th century. Because, again, if you can't maintain at least the current level of college education, the Chinese are going to be studying you for their anthropological research, right? How did this civilization collapse, right? Died of Austrianism. That'll be the autopsy result on the United States. Now, suppose you got some more militant people from Occupy. Well, if it's Occupy, then occupy. Go occupy a building on the campus. Go occupy the president's office. Go occupy some other part of the campus. And the message is, guess what, boys? We're staying here until the bill becomes law. We want it signed by the wonderful Obama, the Messiah, right? The Messiah has got to save us. And as long as you're putting out the full explanation of what this means, you will have the general public with you. So make sure the media is alerted. Half of the young reporters working for local TV stations are groaning under their own student loans. They're going to be at least potentially sympathetic if you do this right. In other words, everything that was botched, bungled, and done wrong by Occupy can now be done correctly. Now, remember again, Senator Warren, this is a great step, but she is not infallible. She's not an oracle. I'm not even going to talk about foreign policy where her ideas are, let's say, not helpful. But in terms of this, she needs your feedback. She's saying that the Stafford loans should go down to 0.75%. Again, what if you've got a Perkins loan? What if you've got a federal direct student loan? What if you've got a PLUS loan through your parents? All of these, and above all, the private student loans have got to be refinanced at this new low rate. And then you will hear the usurers and the exploiters and the bloodsuckers screaming, how dare you take away our cash cow, these students, right? And, fight them out into the open, and there you go. This is the chance. You may never have such a chance again. Right? This is her first bill. If it's up to Wall Street, it may be her last. Somebody asked me yesterday, when will this come up for a vote? That's easy. Never, unless you force it onto the agenda. So the approach of all of these things has got to be, we want this passed now. What we never had with Occupy was a combination of outside action, extra parliamentary action, and action inside the Congress. Now we have that potential. We have at least the leading spearhead of something on the Fed, Wall Street, usury, finance capital, and so forth, in the Congress, in the Senate, thanks to Senator Warren. Now we've got to deliver the mass mobilization. And as far as I can see, this is her hope, because she knows that this is not going to be welcomed by this corrupt Congress. If you're sick of Congress, if you don't like the lobbyists and the bought and paid for and all that, here's your chance to break them on a specific issue. Rather than going out with a losing platform saying, I want to take money out of politics, you're saying, I'm proposing to break the pro-Wall Street lockstep in the Congress on a specific issue where the vast majority of the American people are going to be with you, passively sympathetic or actively mobilizing, because they're going to end up paying less. So take a look at tarpley.net. I have up there an initial statement welcoming what Senator Warren has done. And there's also this campus leaflet. So it's a leaflet that you should go and print out, edit it the way you want, obviously. Get it out on your campus. And if you're a graduating senior or if you're anybody else on a campus, if you're a rising freshman, get on this. If you're a recent graduate, get on this. Mobilize, 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 or face the veil of tears. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, our second hour here on May 10th, 2013, urging an immediate all-out mobilization for the Warren bill, lower interest rates on student loans to 0.75%, make the Fed pay. Now, here in this ideologue website, Legal Insurrection, well, trying to get some radical cover, but they're shilling for Wall Street, that's for sure. Danielle Kurzleben of U.S. News says the reason that student loan rates have to be high is because these people are not good risks. The zombie bank, she says, the zombie bank is a better risk. The zombie bank is already bankrupt by definition. They're wards of the U.S. government. Without the TARP, without the Fed, they wouldn't exist. Let's invest in our own younger generation, because God help us otherwise, this civilization is going to collapse. And then we're told also, U.S. News, the flaw in Senator Warren's logic is that these are long-term student loans that are going to be funded with longer-term borrowing by the Treasury. James Angel, A-N-G-E-L, Associate Professor of Finance at Georgetown University, McDonough School of Business. So even though the T-bill rate right now is effectively zero for longer-term debt, the federal government is paying several percentage points more. This is exactly wrong. The money comes from the Federal Reserve discount window. It is available to the banks at 0.75. This is the Treasury, or in this case, the Department of Education, saying, guess what, Ben? You are opening up a branch of the discount window over here at the Department of Education, and you are going to be mediated through the DOE. You're going to be paying out cash at 0.75%. So watch out for attempts by quackademics, Austrians, monetarists, Keynesians, all kinds of people want to muddy the waters about this, right? They want to prevent you from getting it done. And finally, at the end of the day, we're going to fight hard to get it to come from the Federal Reserve. The thing that people have to hear about up front is that the interest rate is going to go down to 0.75%. but the principle that we regard as crucial is that it is a partial nationalization of the Federal Reserve. It's telling the Federal Reserve, guess what? You may not have planned to, but you're going to put money aside, not just for your zombie friends and not just for your hedge fund hyenas, but now for this important purpose. So it's time to mobilize. Now, the UFAA, the United Front Against Austerity, is the central point you want to refer to also for this. Tarpley.net, to be sure, Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed, and the United Front Against Austerity, UFAA website. Let me also point out that our efforts for the Wall Street sales tax continue undiminished. We're fighting on several fronts. The Wall Street sales tax took two important advances today. There was this week a gathering, a kind of a pep rally in the Hart Senate office building with Elizabeth Warren, with Bernie Sanders, and others. They were talking about the absolute need to defend Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the entitlements, the heritage of the New Deal. And we had one of our fine UFAA activists stand up and confront Bernie, saying, Bernie, how can you talk about saving Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid without specifying where a large part of the money is going to come from? And that's the Wall Street sales tax. And Bernie was not overjoyed to hear this, even though, in theory, he's on record supporting the Wall Street sales tax. So lip service, maybe. He didn't want it raised at this point. Not here, not now. He seems to be mouthing, sorry, it's indispensable. And if you don't understand that, you don't see how you're ever going to get this passed. So that's got to be done. The other one is Rich Trumka of the AFL-CIO had a Twitter event. You can follow these things on the UFAA website. Trumka had a Twitter event, hash mark 1U, the letter U as in UVW, 1U future. And the UFAA sent in a lot of tweets. I sent in a lot of tweets. And he responded to one from the UFAA saying, labor has got to defend the entitlement, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and specify the 1% Wall Street sales tax. And he responded specifically, I guess, endorsing the Wall Street sales tax. The headline coming out of this would be Trumka endorses Wall Street sales tax. He says, have done, am doing, and will do. Take a look at the Twitter tweet that he has. It's up on the UFAA website. So the other thing you've got to be aware of is that Obama is scheming against you every day. He is carrying on these meetings. Some of these are dinners that are announced with reactionary Republican senators, like Corker, people like this. He's been having these dinners, these meetings. Some of them we know about. Some of them we undoubtedly do not know about. There are undoubtedly phone calls going back and forth. The goal here is the grand bargain, and the grand bargain means attempting to improve the U.S. budget situation through the blood and bones of the American people, right? Balancing, you'll never balance, but attempting to ameliorate the debt and deficit position by shifting the depression costs onto working people, the middle class, the poor, and so forth, since Obama's too cowardly to really fight the Wall Street fat cats. So he is planning to betray you, and you've got to be ready for this, right? One of these days, he's going to come out and say, oh, guess what? The grand bargain is here. Obama has no jobs program, no recovery program. As I said before, I seem to detect already an attempt to sabotage, to muddy the waters on what Elizabeth Warren is doing. This was an article in the Washington Post. You can see a reference to that on the Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. But he's talking to those Republicans. He's doing the appeasement of the worst reactionaries. What can we call these? Genocide dinners, killer buffets? I don't know. We'll think of something. Now, the other thing is the House GOP is gearing up to extort more from Obama, since he is obviously such a palooka, such a coward, so treacherous, to be sure. They're getting ready. The House has blocked the Senate budget. There is no conference committee. So the reactionaries were whining for years that the Senate had no budget. The Senate had no budget. This was an obvious debater's point, process point for idiots. Now the House GOP under Boehner has blocked the conference committee on the budget. The House GOP instead has helpfully passed the Pay China First Act. It says we're going to go into default, and we're going to make sure that the bondholders get paid first. The Chinese, the Japanese, the British, the Dutch, all the foreign bondholders get paid first, top priority, then Social Security, fine, if there's anything left. And then what about Medicare? What about vets? No, they don't get anything, way down the list. It is important also, just back to Warren for a minute, Helicopter Ben had given a speech back in March, I guess it was, where he says the Federal Reserve is concerned that the effects of QE3, that is buying these essentially derivatives, right, mortgage-backed securities, toxic derivatives, buying $85 to $100 billion of that every month. He's concerned that the benefits are not getting beyond the zombie banks. Okay, here's a way to get the benefits of cheap credit way beyond the zombie banks into the lives of students, parents, and others, and for the future of the country. This is the way to do it. So it goes directly from the Fed to the DOE to the student loan borrowers. We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Before we leave the domestic economics, remember that Boehner and Camp have their new plan, the labyrinth of cretins, the labyrinth of parliamentary cretins, of which they are leading specimens, that is to lead Obama into a situation where he would be doing transaction therapy, right? You want to avoid default for another month, 2 months, 3 months, then give us this, and this concession, tax cuts for the rich, killer cuts, genocidal austerity against the American people. No. And the only way you can avoid this is go on the offensive in particular in the budget with the Wall Street sales tax, and also knock these guys off balance with the Warren bill, right? What are they going to do? Say, oh, we're the Republicans, we represent the great American middle class, and we will not allow the interest rate to be brought down from 6.8 and much more, right? Some of it's 10, 12% to a mere 0.75%. It's amazing how a piece of legislation like this can clear the air. So take advantage of this. Go, go, go. It's got to be law by July 1st. Now, we're going to have to give short shrift to the foreign affairs stuff, but we did have Secretary Hagel this past Thursday cavorting with two leaders of the terrorist Free Syrian Army at the Soref Symposium of WINEP, the Washington Institute for Near East Peace, at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Does that not constitute material aid to terrorism? We had Carla Del Ponte of the United Nations, a tough old UN bureaucrat veteran, saying as far as she could see, not the Assad regime, but the rebels were the ones using chemical weapons. Big world freak out. Obama White House says, no, it's only Assad. British government, Cameron Haig, no, it's only Assad. They love the terrorists of al-Nusra. Remember, when you say FSA, you're talking frontmen for al-Qaeda. You're talking al-Nusra. We got all kinds of reports this week of more and more units of the FSA are defecting or going over, becoming part of the Nusra al-Qaeda faction. So these two guys that Hagel was cavorting with are essentially frontmen for actual al-Qaeda terrorists, and the U.S. is anxious to arm them. We then had, of course, the further aftermath of the Israeli third bombing of Syria last week, bombing the international airport, bombing this militarized mountain nearby. We have got this group, I have to call them the Yarmulke Brigade, because that's what it sounds like, right? The Yarmulke Brigade of the terrorist rebels have now kidnapped 4 UN peacekeepers this is a repeat performance of a stunt they pulled earlier this year. They must have kidnapped about 24 of these Filipino UN peacekeepers that are stationed on the Golan. The Filipino government says they will now pull back their peacekeepers with Hagel negotiating with terrorists in Washington, D.C., Ambassador Ford, our dear friend, the student who learned the death squad techniques at the knee of Negroponte, Ford was sent into Syria illegally, right, without the permission of the Syrian government to negotiate and encourage the top death squad leaders. We had the Kerry-Lavrov meeting. That seems to lead to, I think, basically nothing. There will be another Geneva conference, possibly, before the end of this month or soon. But then we had a flurry of rumors that Russia was transferring S-300 advanced surface-to-air missiles to the Syrian government. They may also be transferring SS-26 Stone missiles, or what the Russians call Iskander. The NATO parlance on that S-300 is the SA-10 Grumble. So SA-10s and SS-26s. Lavrov says he's not going to do it. Who knows? The message was received. Remember that the Syrians had a paid contract for those. It was our hero Medvedev who betrayed them in the same way that he betrayed Libya. This was back in 2010. Medvedev backed off on delivering those the missiles. Remember, under the UN Charter, the right of self-defense is inherent and inalienable. The Israelis, of course, whining, saying to the Russian government, please don't arm the Syrians. That will cramp our style when we want to bomb them. They've bombed them 3 times this year. The inherent right of self-defense overrides anybody's opinion of the Syrian government. And we've also got Horseface John Forbes Kerry, the Skull and Bones Secretary of State, warning Moscow, Lavrov, don't do it. A lot of this stuff seems to be a personal con job of Kerry on Lavrov, and we're betting here that Lavrov is strong enough not to fall into this trap, right? Whatever club Kerry is a member of, you don't want to be a member of that, right? Don't join Skull and Bones, even as an honorary member. And of course, what we do not have is we have Sybil Edmonds of the Boiling Frogs, right? With this analysis of hers that there was already a secret dirty deal between the U.S. and Russia, that Russia would somehow be given permission to do what they've already done, which is to crush the rebellion in Chechnya, and that in exchange the U.S. would simply be invited by Russia to bomb and destroy Syria, that Russia would dump Syria. And what we find is that is inaccurate, right? Maybe disinformation. What we see also is that it leads precisely the wrong direction. In other words, it leads us away from the reality. The reality is on the ground. The Assad forces are winning. This week we had Jennifer Rubin in the Washington Post. We also had Debka of the Israelis talking about how the Syrian Arab army is winning on the ground. For example, the town of Kirbet Ghazali, key road between Jordan and Syria, has fallen to the Syrian army, the Assad forces, and this alleged, Putin's plan for betrayal, conjured up by the Boiling Frogs people, that seems to be less and less accurate. So Nasrallah of Hezbollah says that he is going to get game-changing weapons from Syria no matter what the Israelis do. And some of this involves the Fatah 110 missile, but there are others. There are other comparable weapons that are reportedly already in the hands of Hezbollah. So remember, the last couple of times Israel has attacked Lebanon, they've been militarily defeated. That was the case in 2006. Some people still not grasping that fact, but that was a debacle, and another attack on Syria likely to end in the same way. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. The Russian Foreign Ministry is alarmed by the psychological warfare, mass brainwashing campaign in the Western world in favor of an attack on Syria. China, we had the visit by Netanyahu and actually by Abu Abbas of the Palestinians in China this week. The Chinese government has come out with its own peace plan for the Palestinian question. Go back to the 67 borders. East Jerusalem is the Palestinian capital. Stop the settlements. Not bad, but it's not clear whether China is willing to put much oomph behind it. I would also recommend that people take a look at that Russian victory parade. Right, yesterday, the 9th of May in Moscow, a big day-long celebration, 68 years since the defeat of the Nazi fascists by Russia and the other allies. That is, I think, it has certain character of a warning. Right? This was a pretty robust military display, right? 10,000 troops, a whole bunch of S-300s rolling through Red Square, very impressive, and certainly it can't be lost on the NATO powers that there is a substantial military force there, and that somehow at the end of the road there is that also to consider. So, connected closely to this complex is, of course, Benghazi. The Republican witch hunt is evident enough. We calculated if four victims, 4 dead diplomats get 1 day of hearings, then we need 1,000 days of hearings for the casualties of the Iraq War, plus the other casualties of terrorism. We'd probably be up to 2,000 or 3,000 days under the Bush administration, but it was not to be. The difference now with Benghazi is that this has expanded, right? It was for quite a while only the ultra-reactionaries at Fox News, but now we have Cheryl Atkinson at CBS, we have Washington Post, National Public Radio, we have ABC News. Jonathan Karl has something about this this morning. Lindsey Graham says it smells like Watergate. Well, fine. Our approach to this is it's good for Obama and the Republicans to be at each other's throats. Harken back. The only way Social Security was saved under Clinton was by the Lewinsky scandal, which made Clinton so dependent on the New Deal Democrats that he didn't dare alienate his core base of support by attacking the entitlements, which is what Obama seems to think he can get away with, right? He seems to think he has magical powers. Let the entire media, the entire establishment, because that's what this is, the Washington establishment should indeed turn against Obama. More power to Lindsey Graham and these other extremists they have the Tea Party fanatics breathing down their neck. They want to be seen doing extreme things against Obama. Wonderful. We want a completely poisoned atmosphere of gridlock because we don't want the grand bargain. And indeed, we want Obama back on his heels so that he's actually got to go back to the Osawatomie line and let's see some more anti-Republican methods. Those have disappeared now for the past 4 to 6 weeks with this sharp right turn. Let's just remember the hearings. If we look at the hearings as a whole, we would say the villain who emerges from this, the person that you'd want to call next, would be General Carter Ham, the commander of U.S. AFRICOM, U.S. African Command, because he's the one who commands all the military assets that were denied. We were told in the course of this that there was a Special Forces Colonel Gibson, with a force of a dozen highly trained special forces. He was in Tripoli. The Libyan government has one Lockheed Hercules C-130 transport plane is about to fly from Tripoli to Benghazi. Colonel Gibson wants to put his special forces on board this C-130. and he's ordered not to do it. Well, who could order him not to do it? I looked up on the internet. The African Special Forces Command is subordinated to the U.S. AFRICOM. It's in Stuttgart, Germany. It's commanded by General Carter Ham. We want General Carter Ham grilled. Why did you order those special forces not to go and save the lives of the diplomats in Benghazi? We're also told that there were attempts to bring in air support, and they were told, oh, no, it has to come all the way from Aviano. Baloney. Aviano is all the way up in northern Italy, right? It's near the border with Slovenia. No, there's Sigonella. Sigonella is the NATO air base in the middle of Sicily. It's not that far away. Look at the map. Less than an hour, I would judge. Who commands that? Well, if it's assets for Africa, it's going to be General Carter Ham. The other one, of course, is the thing that this hearing tended to obscure. It's a CIA annex in Benghazi, which is the main center of interest. And there is this team, right, half a dozen or whatever it is, of highly trained special forces, veterans and all that, under the command of the CIA. Where is General Petraeus? These are the two people that have to be called. We want to hear testimony from General Carter Ham. We want to hear testimony from General David Petraeus. Anybody can see that Petraeus is part of a pro-Romney clique, an October surprise coup faction, Golpisti. It's very interesting. The word Romney never was heard in this entire hearing. This entire thing is politicized to a fare-thee-well. It took place in the hot phase of a presidential campaign. Everybody knows this. A lot of these generals have been fired. Petraeus, Ham, down the list, right? You can see I've published the list, and I've tried to keep it up to date. There was a general rolling of heads after Obama got reelected, and it's obvious he was trying to oust generals that had come out of from under their rocks against him in favor of Romney. It was a military cabal, a camarilla of Golpisti, and Ham looks like he needs to be questioned. Petraeus, for sure, is at the center of this entire thing, right? He was out that night going to see Argo. We never heard any of that, right? These hearings are extremely narrow and poorly done. So Lindsey Graham wants Watergate. Boehner wants more emails. Great. Go for it. Fight. Poison the atmosphere with Obama. No grand bargain. It's also important to see this guy Hicks that we saw. He has passed over into the reactionary camp. If Victoria Tonsing is your lawyer, you have chosen the faction that you're with. This other guy, Thompson, this dour person who refused to talk to the Democrats, it's clear. These are partisans. They want to be partisans. Great. Again, we welcome it. The truth of the matter is this. Ansar al-Sharia, commanded by Kumu, is a CIA asset in the same sense that al-Qaeda in general is. Kumu is a graduate of the Guantanamo Bay training school. He was sent back to Libya to overthrow Gaddafi. He got his further orders, presumably, go and attack Ambassador Stevens, probably close to Stevens. They've been working together. The purpose of the Stevens mission, we're told, was to make the Benghazi post into a permanent post. For what? Well, because you're going to transfer jihadis, extremist fighters, terrorists, from Libya to Turkey and then on to Syria. That is why another thing we didn't hear about is meeting with the Turkish diplomat. And, of course, weapons from Gaddafi's arsenals have to go to Turkey for the fighters in Syria. That's what he was doing. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Rushing ahead now to try to cover the immense amount of stuff. Remember, the reality is Ansar al-Sharia, Kumu, controlled by the U.S., they're the ones who killed Stevens. So headline, CIA asset kills U.S. ambassador. The ambassador, again, was there precisely to work with these people, to transfer them into Turkey and then on to Syria. February 17th, Martyrs Brigade, we've been through this before. They're the ones who helped the U.S. by eliminating General Yunus, too independent, I guess, as the commander of the rebel forces in Libya, and they got in Hifter, who had been flown in from practically Langley just in time for that. And then we've got the CIA forces at the annex, presumably told by the Petraeus CIA, don't do anything. So that's the reality. The last talk with the Turkish representative leads us in the right direction. It was not mentioned. So Republicans are invited to escalate this. However, remember, Watergate was a CIA FBI operation to overthrow Nixon, incidentally, but mainly to weaken the presidency as a whole. Nixon somehow thought that he had to run a cover-up for what was a CIA FBI operation. Remember, Gordon Liddy, FBI, James McCord, CIA, on, Office of Naval Intelligence getting into the act. Obama has made the same institutional mistake, right? Why defend this, right? Why not bring out the fact that Petraeus and so forth were working for Romney? Then you'll get to the heart of the matter. And the Republicans always interested to denigrate this film, right? Nasrallah of the Islamophobia network, and the embarrassing for them is that John Bolton of the Romney campaign is the big honcho in the Islamophobia network. Now, let's talk about how to run politics. The Warren bill is a solid indication my methods work. Radical, reformist political activity, peaceful, nonviolent, works. The only question is, there's now a golden opportunity. Will people have the sense to mobilize, or will they sit in impotent passivity and inertia and come up with reasons why they can't do it? After all, it violates the Austrian school, doesn't it? Yes, exactly. That's why it's good. We've got this UKIP, UK Independence Party of Farage, have done something in these most recent British elections. I am getting persistent reports from people on Twitter that Farage is someone assisted by Barclays Bank and Rupert Murdoch, and I wish people would send me some concrete references about this. For sure, the UKIP, it's xenophobic, right? It's trying to, explain to British workers and so forth that the reason for their problems is foreigners, be it illegal immigrants or the Eurocrats in Brussels and so forth. If you don't want independence from the Bank of England, which these people, as far as I can see, do not propose, how can you be for any kind of independence? Grillo in Italy, the model for this, he continues in his path of impotence. This guy's super rich, but he wants his deputies and senators to live essentially on 2,500 euros a month, plus a couple of other allowances. And if they try to keep the money, then he wants to slander them online. These are people who borrowed the money to get to Rome, okay? These are people who left their wife and kid at home with 1,000 euros in the bank account and what have you. But now, the most bankrupt, the dumbest, and the most destructive, potentially, is this march on Washington for July 4th. This is a lamentable declaration of bankruptcy by the people behind it. Ron Kokesh, you can see, I clashed with him twice last year, once at the Bilderberg meeting almost exactly a year ago. That's on Tarpley.net website. Also at the New World's Fair meeting in New York City. He wanted to come and harass my speech. This is an example of a person who believed in Ron Paul and was overtaken by the unbelievable treachery of Ron Paul and Rand Paul, right, in joining the Romney campaign. And when that treachery of Rand Paul consummated itself, people who had been supporting the Paul-Tard cause were confronted with the moment. What are you going to do? Are you going to turn away from this? You're going to understand that the treachery is rooted in this libertarian ideology, or are you going to try to trim somehow? Well, Kokesh has now become a right-wing anarchist. How about this? October 1922, Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader, leads a group of disgruntled war veterans dressed in black in the March on Rome. Right? This is the grand debut, the first official debut of European fascism. Now, on July 4th here, we're supposed to have a group of disgruntled war veterans dressed in black, carrying guns, going into the District of Columbia. What about states' rights? Now, they'll say, oh, no, the District of Columbia is not a state. This is idiotic pedantry. The District of Columbia should be a state. Right now, it doesn't happen to be. But what about their laws, right? You're saying we come from Texas and Arizona, and we know what those people in the District of Columbia need, right? Black people in particular. They're going to have guns shoved down their throats whether they like it or not, because that's what we good old boys want out here. So a group of right-wing reactionaries, essentially people, who are to the right now of Paul, right-wing anarchists, are going to go into the District of Columbia and say, we don't care what you black folk have been voting for here in the district. We don't care about your laws. We're going to ram it down your throat. Now, Kathy Lanier, the police chief here, is very foolish. Her definition of civil disobedience is wrong. Civil disobedience involves breaking a law. That's the essence of civil disobedience. If you don't break a law, there's no civil disobedience. But civil disobedience, as practiced in any meaningful way, say by Martin Luther King, is nonviolent. Once you bring the loaded gun into the picture, that is not civil disobedience anymore. No government in the world could allow itself to be intimidated by a gang of right-wing reactionaries brandishing, toting guns, coming into the Capitol to do what? To intimidate the Congress, the presidency, the courts, and to intimidate the black population of the District of Columbia. And then let's look at the demand. What's the demand? That there should be open carry in the District of Columbia? All of this Sturm und Drang, all of this sound and fury for that? How about fighting for something real? Look, guys, people who are going to go on this march, I guarantee you, a lot of you are groaning, you're being crushed under student loan debt. Why not forget this, drop this entire crackpot project, and devote yourself to something that's actually going to get you somewhere? Force the Federal Reserve to lower the interest rate on your student loans. Here's another one. Beyond it, if you are facing foreclosure, there was a Paul Tard backer in the Washington Post more than a year ago. He was supporting little Ron, but the leprechaun, but he was facing foreclosure. Force the Federal Reserve to buy up mortgages, troubled mortgages from individual people, and then let the interest rate be brought down to the discount rate, currently 0.75%. Why don't you raise some demands that actually get you somewhere, not symbolic demands of gun fetishism and maximum alienation? Now, of course, you can't come into the District of Columbia brandishing guns. People like this will be arrested or worse. So what is the benefit? What is going to come out of this? It's a wonderful recipe for provocation, isn't it? Anybody in the world, right? The Ku Klux Klan can send somebody. Al-Qaeda can send somebody. Anybody and his brother can send a provocateur in there. Something goes off, and then it's a tragedy. This is wrong. It's a waste of time. It's worse than a crime. It's a mistake. It should not be done. So the word from here is drop all of that sideshow stuff. We've finally got something worth fighting for in the Congress. Mobilize now. Mobilize massively and get that Warren bill passed, signed into law. Obama doesn't want to sign it. Make him do it. Get that passed into law by July 1st as our graduation gift to the class of 2013. A graduation gift. From now on, kids, your interest rate goes down to 0.75. We're going to save you $5,000 to $6,000 a year in many cases on student loans. See you next week on World Crisis Radio.